Thom Hartmann here with you. And Rialto55 over on Twitter says, Tom, can you please explain the difference between risk corridor payments and the insurance company payments that Trump says he'll withhold? Thank you. Yeah, real quickly, I'll do that, and then we'll pick up your phone calls. There were two big financial pieces. Well, there were many, but these two things that you're talking about, parts of Obamacare. With regard to the risk corridors, the insurance companies were asked to take on, millions of new customers and with no idea how sick or healthy they are, and at prices that were determined in advance, which is a prescription for possible disaster. Maybe not, but you just don't know. So Obamacare had this provision called the risk corridors in it that said that any company, any health insurance company that participates in good faith on the Obamacare exchanges, sets an appropriate price, everybody agrees this is good, yeah, thank you, you put it on there and you sell your insurance. At the end of the year, if that insurance company broke even or made a profit, great. If they lost money at that price, then, up to a certain amount of losing money, they could come to the federal government at the end of the year and document their losses, say, hey, we lost, $1.3 billion last year, selling Obamacare on the exchanges, and the federal government would reimburse them for that $1.3 billion. So their risk is limited to the corridor, which is basically to zero, to not making a profit. So, with no downside risk, the insurance company said, sure, we'll jump into this enthusiastically and we'll keep prices down. So that's what Marco Rubio blew up in 2015 when he attached a piece of legislation that ended the risk corridor payments to an omnibus budget bill that got passed in 2015, became law in early 2016, and that's why you saw the 25% increases in Obamacare prices in some states, particularly those states that were Republican-run and therefore were not fully compliant with Obamacare. So that's the risk corridors. The payments that Trump is withholding is a whole different thing. And that is basically the other part of Obamacare is that, say the insurance policy for a family of four, in whatever, family of four in your state costs $1,000 a month. And if you're making over a certain amount of money, and I think it was like around 60 or 70 or maybe even $80,000 a year, something like that. It's a high end of, the upper middle class. If you're making more than that, you're going to pay that $1,000 a month. But if you're only making $40,000 a year or $30,000 a year, which is kind of closer to the median individual income in the United States, household is around 50, but that is typically 2 or 3 workers. But say you're only making $30,000 a year, at that point, the federal government says, that $1,000 a month policy, buy that, and we will cover, say, $400 a month of it. So it's only going to cost you $600 a month. And that balance, that additional $400, we will pay on your behalf directly to the insurance companies. And these are called there's an acronym for a 3-letter acronym, RSAs, RSCs, something like that, risk payment adjustments or risk cost adjustments or whatever they are. There's an acronym for it. And I should check our chat room because Sue is always on top of this stuff. But anyhow, so those payments have nothing to do with the risk corridors. That's the federal government subsidizing you if you're working but you're not making more than $50,000, $60,000 a year. That's the federal government subsidizing your insurance. And those payments are made to the insurance companies every month. And typically it's around $1 billion, $2 billion a month from what I've read in the papers, totaling maybe 10, 12, 15, $20 billion a year. Not a lot of money from the point of view of the federal government. I mean, it's like, one day of operation at the Pentagon sort of thing. But, or a couple days maybe at the most. So those are the payments that the federal government issues to the insurance companies every month to cover the Obamacare subsidies so that Obamacare is affordable to low-income working Americans. Not very low income, that's Medicaid, that's a whole other thing, but Medicaid, this is Obamacare. Now, because those payments are made by the Department of Health and Human Services, or via the Department of Health and Human Services, which is an executive branch agency. The president has the power to say to the head of HHS, no, don't make those payments. Don't send that money out. And that's what he's been threatening to do. And if he does that, instantly all the insurance companies are thrown into a loss situation where they have to jack their prices up if they're going to survive. But they can only jack their prices up once a year. They have to submit these numbers in advance, and they go into effect, every November when the new enrollment period happens. And that's the whole uncertainty issue. You see all these articles in the press about how the insurance companies are increasing their prices right now 10, 15, 20, 25, 30%. There's one insurance company in one state that's going up 40%. And when they were asked why, as I recall, it was a vice president of Blue Cross Blue Shield. He said, because of the uncertainty. Because we don't know if Trump's actually going to pay us. And so we have to nail down a price at which we can at least break even if we're going to participate in this business. So if Trump were simply to come out and say, yeah, no problem, I'm going to honor the obligations that our government made in the law. If he was simply to say that, everything would be cool. Well, not everything. I mean, the risk corridor still is a big deal. It's hurt all of us. Marco Rubio damaged anybody who's getting Obamacare in his attempt to set up the destruction of Obamacare. And if you want to know the details of this, just Google Marco Rubio risk corridors, New York Times, and you can find the whole thing. Sue says finding lots of mentions of risk adjustment. I think they're called risk adjustment payments or cost risk, CRAs or something like that. But anyhow, those payments. Thank you, Sue, for looking. I appreciate that.